what age groups would you recommend testosterone for? And essentially, what is testosterone? Because I've got a very basic understanding of what it is and how it works and what it does. And who would you recommend it to? I'll start off nice and first to break the ice. I got a question for you.
All right.
Does HTLT pre-workout actually give you an itchy asshole? My boy and me and Alex, like we tried it, bro. We actually had a mad chest session and we were absolutely so firstly, kudos to a great pre-workout. And secondly, maybe you just wanted to plug that or speak about that for a little bit, because I was introduced to it by my boy Alex just like, only a few weeks ago. And I had one of the best chest sessions I've had in a long time. So do you want to talk about that product a little bit?
Sure.
And,
Yeah, well, basically all pre-workouts are pretty much the same, really. They usually have some kind of a stimulant, caffeine, etc. And then they have some pump. Well, I'll get into that, but they have a stimulant effect, so that gets you amped up, like caffeine or whatever stimulates you. That's one thing. Then there's usually some kind of a pump ingredient to help you get the pump, and then beta alanine is completely different. It's something that's going to improve your cardiovascular performance. Anything perhaps a minute or longer, or if you're doing a lot of sets and you're not resting as much between sets, or you're doing a drop set, force set, that's where it helps. You get those tingles from the beta alanine.
Beta alanine in there? Because I can't remember, but all I remember is we were training for a long time. And I don't normally lift heavy these days when I'm training upper body or chest. But dude, I was going pound for pound with Alex, and he's 22, you know what I mean? So, and I was pumping it. Well, how heavy did we get on the chest presses?
40 plus to 50.
50 kilos on the inclines, and it was good. So I mean, I really enjoyed it. The taste was good. Great job on that too, which leads me further. I wanted to actually talk to you about testosterone and all the hype around testosterone, because I've got a lot of followers as well, a lot of young guys that want to use testosterone, and obviously they don't want to use SARMs yet. They're around the ages 14 to 16, and which I'll get onto later. I'll want to talk to you about your opinion on SARMs and all that. So what age groups would you recommend testosterone for? And essentially, what is testosterone? Because I've got a very basic understanding of what it is and how it works and what it does. And who would you recommend it to?
Well, I'll start off by saying these 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all these kids, teenagers, they shouldn't be using this. And I'm not saying that because it's dangerous. I'm saying that because they're so young, they're going to make gains anyway. And this is not the way. You have to maximize your progress naturally and then take other things that help you build more muscle later in your life when you're older. If you get all your gains at a young age, then what are you going to do when you turn 20? So I would highly discourage any teenager from taking testosterone. It's natural. I mean, it's on WADA's watch list, so it may or may not be natural in the future, but it's not something I would take. It's not dangerous. In fact, I believe it's much safer to take testosterone than a pre-workout. I don't know anyone that's dying from testosterone, but I know that people, if you overdo caffeine, overdo pre-workout, you can actually have heart problems. It can be slightly dangerous. So to me, pre-workout, much more dangerous.
I mean, it's the same with pre-workout, really. Some of the stronger pre-workouts back in my time, back even in your time when we had the Jack, the Mesomorph, the 1MR, when they had the 1,3 Dimension and the DMA, that shit was making people drop like flies, not even just bodybuilders, dude. There'd be cyclists and wrestlers and boxers taking those pre-workouts, just dropping dead from heart attacks. And these blokes in their mid-20s, early 30s. So I get what you're saying, from a safety standpoint. But, as we know, there's a lot of young kids now that just want the results now. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to wait, and enjoy the journey over time. Me personally, myself, dude, I started using performance enhancing drugs and steroids when I was 22 years old. So I started bodybuilding when I was 18. And from 18 to 22, I kept it completely natural. And then at 22, almost 23 is when I did my first test cycle. So I look back to that time, Greg, and honestly, I'm forever grateful that I waited just at least to that age, to the minimum of that age. If I could actually go back, probably would have waited even longer to 24, 25 to actually, use injectables and all that. But I'm happy to say that because now there's kids these days that are 17, 18 that are wanting to inject, wanting to use high doses of roids. And it baffles my mind. I get it. I understand. I do. I was once young too, wanting everything so soon, so quick. But as you get older, you kind of realize it's shit, man. like health is so fucking important. And, you know, there's like a law of diminishing returns and a ceiling that you hit if you start, you know, enhancing way too soon. You're not going to get that quality muscle, that dense quality muscle through hard work. And you can see the differences in the physiques, the ones that are enhanced really, really young and the ones that are enhanced a bit later in their mid to early 20s, you know, unless like, I feel like unless you're going to be an IFBB pro or something like that, it's best to steer clear until at least 22, 23. What would your take? When did you start, bro? Like, what age were you when you started?
I was in my early 30s, and I had already been training 42 natural. Yeah, I did 42 natural competitions, but I think for me, I think I had it easy because when I was younger, it wasn't easily accessible. I came from a small town. It wasn't like anyone was doing it. There was maybe one guy that was using steroids, and it was like, oh my goodness. But nowadays, you can type on Google SARMs, and you can get it at your door. There was no SARMs when I was a kid. There was none of this stuff. There was no, I couldn't even get a protein bar. The protein powder, I wasn't even using that. It was like, you had to do everything on your own. There was no Walden Farms. There was no sweeteners. It was just salt and pepper and eat, and you didn't have the internet to really tell you what to do. So I was like, I would say fortunate because I was kind of like not exposed to this. So for me, it was easy. I was 100% against steroids at 22. I was like, I can't believe people are doing this. Completely changed my mind years later. Obviously, after I hit my natural genetic limit, I'm like, well, I'm not gaining any more muscle. I may as well do this. I want to get an IFBB Pro card. And so that's when I went on. And so that's why I was able to keep getting bigger and bigger into my older age.
Yeah, man, because I've looked back, you know, I haven't watched too many of your videos. I've seen enough to know what you're about. And I looked back at some of your contest photos and your competing photos. And honestly, that kind of like interested me the most, man, because at the moment, like I'm competing as well, and I want to get
right. What, 4 weeks out, roughly, or
4.5 weeks out, man. Yeah, so I'm starting to feel it now. You know what I mean? I'm feeling the hunger, the lethargy, the tiredness, and just all that jazz of like a comp prep. And yeah, just looking back at some of your photos, dude. I know this is my second question. I haven't given you a chance to ask a question, but I'll ask one more before I let you ask me some questions because I'm sure you got some for me. If you have any tips or tricks or and if you could share your wisdom on the best ways to get absolutely stage shredded, because I'll tell you what, like I'm probably sitting around 7.5% body fat. I know you see my stories. I watch you see my stories, and I've seen you support me by liking my photos, and I appreciate that. And I just want to know from an older gentleman to myself, like what can I do to maximize my shreds leading into this competition? I came second in my last one. I'm really looking to secure that pro card with the WBFF. My problem is, Greg, is I always have a hard time dialing in my legs to match my upper body conditioning. Like I know they're always the last for me to come in and everyone has fat distributions in different places, but for me, they're always the last place to go in. So if there's any tips or tricks or any wisdom that you could share of what you did over the years of your competing career to get your legs diced, I would much appreciate it, my guy. So share away with me.
Well, we actually share similar physiques. When I was in my 20s and whatnot, my legs, the last thing to get ripped. I had the great abs, the six-pack, obliques, everything perfect. Well, for me, I was like, this is great. Who cares about the legs so much, really? It was only the last thing on a stage it really mattered. But, you know, on the beach and whatnot, the abs was more important. So I was kind of fortunate. So I was very easy to get my abs ripped. But the thing is, if you get lean enough, you're going to be ripped everywhere. And what you've done, I think, is the right thing. You're not bulking up hardcore in the off season. You're not fat. You're not carrying 50 extra pounds. You have to lose weight. And so you're doing so, and you got 4 weeks. And so what you really need to do is just do a lot of cardio. The more calories you burn, the more you're going to be able to get shredded. It's all about the calorie deficit. If you get 1,000 calorie deficit a day, you're going to lose 2 pounds of fat a week. That's a lot, probably more than you need to lose. And then the last thing you need to do, it's the ever important peak week. It's unbelievable how much you can change in the last week, even the last 3 days, night and day. You can look like you dieted for 2 or 3 weeks in 3 days if you do the proper peak week, which is basically you cut out your carbs, just dehydrate yourself completely by drinking a ton of water, cutting out your carbs, so you eat a lot of fats and protein, and then eventually you're just going to cut out all your water and just carb up and go in dehydrated. And unfortunately, to get that shredded shrink wrap look around the legs, abs everywhere, you have to be dehydrated. You can't expect to look full and shredded at the same time. It's just not going to happen. You kind of have to pick one or the other. So when I competed and I did all my natural shows, I always went for, I'm going to go leaner rather than going for that fuller look. So I cut out my water, got more dehydrated, and I looked leaner. The only problem is, if you go too far, you can get some cramping. That's never fun. You got to be careful. So You can't cut
that's
out all
actually
your
what you do.
sodium, potassium. You need to carb up and you still need to eat all that. And if you notice you're cramping, you have to consume a little bit of water. And when I say cut out your water, I'm not saying like a day or two. I'm talking like, 12 to 18 hours before you're on stage, just enough. And for you, I would suggest you probably should be taking a diuretic, couple diuretics, safe. You don't want to use
I mean,
Lasix.
like a herbal diuretic or a mod diuretic, like a pharmaceutical diuretic.
I don't want to promote and say, you should all be using drugs and whatnot, but I would have taken hydrochloroside with triamterene. It's basically for high blood pressure. And I'm not telling you out there, don't go and do this, but that's what I've done.
Guys, like,
And if you're trying to get shredded for one day,
this like disclaimer, guys. Like, we're gonna say a whole bunch of shit, and this is just leading on from my life experience, from Greg's life experience, what we do with ourselves. Don't try this if you're not in this industry, if you're not doing this. Like, you know what I mean? We've had years of experience, and that's all I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, I do what I do for myself, and I'm not out there to tell anyone like to do what I'm doing. I'm just like to be very transparent, as are you, my guy, in our approaches to our bodybuilding and what we do. Because as we know in this industry, dude, everyone's a liar, dude. There's fake natties running rampant. There's people out there that are just claiming like, oh, I take this supplement, I take that, I don't use anything. It's so blatant and obvious to see. And I think the big appeal with your audience and my audience, and even my dear late brothers Aziz's audience, is that we're always very transparent about what we did, whether it was in our favor or not. And I'm sure you probably experienced this too. Just being transparent and open has accrued the fan base that we have and the respect that we get in the industry. And there should be more of that, to be honest. More people should be able to speak at this, because these kids and these young guys, they're still going to fucking do it. So why don't we educate them and teach them, and then let them make their informed decisions on their own, rather than just sweeping it under the rug and then lying to everyone, and giving people false hope.
absolutely, knowledge is power. And I mean, these diuretics can make you look leaner on that day, but it's very dangerous. It's more dangerous than the steroids themselves, in my opinion. You see a lot of people dropping dead the day of the show. You use the wrong ingredients, you take too much of it. There's certain kinds that are more dangerous than others, like Lasix, going to be a lot more dangerous than this one. I could go in, we don't have the time to go into everything, but don't overdo it and be safe. And, when I did 42 shows, realize I did them natural, 42 times dehydrating, all this without the drugs. And then I got into it. So I already knew my body. If you're doing your first show and you're going to use diuretics, you don't know what you're doing, you might go too far and you might, go past the point of no return.
And I've seen it, dude. Like, I've been in India before as a guest judge, and I've watched competitions where these bodybuilders have just dropped on stage because their calves are cramping, or their chest starts cramping, and it's horrible to witness. And I'm like, shit. So I've never personally dropped my water, but in saying that, my coach is looking after my peak week and what I'm doing, so I'm just leaving my trust in his hands. And I will keep that in mind for my preps and my future preps leading forward, to get that crispy dry look. So I appreciate that, my guy. I'll definitely keep that in mind, and I'll stop talking a bit now because I'm sure you got some questions for me.
Well, let me just end that by saying, like, look, we're trying to be at the peak of our sport. You're trying to win a pro card here. I mean,
yeah, dude.
Any
I ain't
sport,
coming in second place, bro. I'm coming to win.
Exactly. Any sport where you're trying to push your limits to be the best that you can be. I don't care what it is. I've competed in biking, running, swimming, triathlons. I've been in so many different races where people have collapsed in a triathlon, in a running race, and been taken to ambulance, multiple people, especially in hot weather. It's not more people collapsing in bodybuilding than in running. I've seen way more people collapse from dehydration during triathlons than I've seen on a bodybuilding stage, but it can happen. So the danger is there. So I just want to say, just even if you're trying to do things healthy and natural, it doesn't mean there's no chance of getting injured.
Of course, because any sport, Greg, when it's done to in excess, it oversees the point of healthiness. Like, you got to understand, guys, like you're bodybuilding, you're eating clean, cool. Like, if you keep it very basic, but anything that's done to a level of extreme is never going to be healthy for the long term. It's not. That's just the reality. And people need to know that so they can make their own decisions,